Our first speaker was born in northern Rhodesia, which is now called Zambia. His hobbies include writing, teaching, and following his life's purpose, which is to help save the world. He has been a lifesaver, marine engineer, teacher, entrepreneur, screen printer, researcher, blogger, author, captain, and world traveler, seeker of truth and transformation. His special achievements include being an author of 3 different books. First one, Beyond the Age of Ignorance, The Quest for the Truth. 2, Gifts, Giving and Receiving, We Maintain the Balances of Life. And 3, Help Save Our World, The Feminine Revolution, Universal and Natural Feminine Wisdom Unveiled. He's currently developing a world transforming, Help Save Our World organization and people's movement to bring about a fundamental change in our world. The speech title is Nature is Calling You. Everyone, please help me welcome Dennis the teacher.
Thank you so much, Madam Toastmaster. I'm pouring thinners all over me. I'm going to dive into the cases of thinners. I'm about to strike the match to set myself alight and burn myself to death. I'm watching the match as if in slow motion as it travels towards the flint of the box. At that split second when I'm about to hit the box, the door bursts open in front of me. My son dives through the door and grabs my arm and says, "What do you think you're doing?" He saved my life. He never came to the factory, or he would end up doing some work. On that day in particular, he was driven. The school bell rang, he ran and he jumped on his bicycle and he pedaled with all of his might to get to the factory. And he burst through that door. It's as if I've been guided and protected my whole life. And he was the one who saved me. Now, I was suffering from extremely deep depression with the breakup of my family and extreme pressures of a collapsing economy, and things were getting tougher and tougher in South Africa to survive. With this seemingly no future, I just had this tunnel vision where my options became less and less and less, until all I could see was this faint light in front of me of possibilities and hope. But all I wanted was for that light to go out. I had been to psychologists and psychiatrists, and none of them really could help me. All they did is made things worse by giving me these huge bills to have to pay on top of all of my other bills. I had survived longer than most of my other friends who are all in the manufacturing industry in South Africa. One of my friends shot himself in the head, leaving his estranged wife and children behind. Another friend of mine took his gun and put it in his mouth and pulled the trigger, and the bullet came out in the front of his face. Luckily, he survived. A friend of mine, Andrew, said to me, "Dennis, go to the mountains for 10 days. And I said, no, I can't. Everyone's relying on me. I've got so much work to do because I had a printing business at the time. None of the printing will go out. And he said to me, "Dennis, go to the mountains for 10 days. After he had left, I went over it in my mind, and he called me back and he said, "Dennis, go to the mountains for 10 days. And I said, okay, I'll do it. So what I did was gathered a rucksack and a 2-man tent that I had at home. And I got my estranged wife to take me up into the Drakensberg Mountains. But on the way out of town, of course, I was a vegan, and I'd grabbed a whole lot of fruits and vegetables and whatever, put it into my bag. But I needed a cooker top to screw into the gas bottle so that I could put the cooking pot on and cook the food that needed to be cooked. So I stopped at a gas store on the way out of Pinetown and bought this cooker. It was just this cooker top, but it was in a white cardboard box. And the only thing that I took with me to make sure that I did nothing was I dropped a pen in the bottom of my bag. So my wife, estranged wife, drove me out deep into the Drakensberg Mountains. And I set up my 2-man tent, and there was nothing there. It was just these rolling mountains, and just absolutely seemed like no life whatsoever, just barren landscape, just grasslands. And what I did is I set up my campsite, climbed inside, and I just had a cotton blanket and a sheet. And I lay there and slept for 7 days solid. I rolled this way, I rolled that way. I would only get up to go to the bathroom, to walk outside, go and pee. And I could see the droppings of buck that had just walked past right in front of my tent. So I could see that life had been passing by, but all I did was sleep. Now, that was so critically important because I was so burnt out that my body needed to recover that natural balance, which is so essential for life. I also recovered on my REM sleep. What happens if you don't sleep properly and you don't maintain that balance, you start to become so imbalanced and you eventually lose your mind. It's like what they used to use in prison of war camps to torture prisoners, is deprive them of sleep. So in that extremely tough environment which I was in the factory, I had burnt myself out so badly. I wasn't sleeping, I was super stressed, and I just created this total state of imbalance where I just couldn't survive anymore. So now I was connected to the earth. And then I started to walk barefoot, walking out along the pathways to the mountain streams, watching the otters and the birds and the fish in the streams. And then I would slowly walk back and go and sleep again because it was exhausting. It was high altitude, much less air, and I had to recreate my fitness. So that's what I did each day, connecting to nature, connecting to the animals, and slowly rebuilding my fitness again. But while I was there on my, it must have been my 9th day, I woke up to a horrendous situation. I crawled out of my tent and I looked around me, and there was this huge, like about a 200 strong troop of baboons on this hillside right next to me. And I knew that I had nothing to defend myself with. I didn't have a knife, I didn't have a gun, I didn't have anything that I could do anything with. And I knew my only chance of survival in that situation was to topple the alpha male off his perch. So in an instant, I started running, just rushing at the alpha male. He was right at the top of the hill on the highest rock, this huge, big alpha male with these jaws, just like a rabid dog. You know, they've got these fangs and just jaws that are terrifying. But I thought of nothing else but chasing and running straight at him. And I'm running at him and jumping over rocks and just screaming and running towards him. And he's just looking at me and I'm looking at him, and our eyes connect, and I'm running and I'm getting closer, and he's looking at me and I'm looking at him. Now I can start to see the saliva dripping down his jaw as I'm watching him and he's watching me. And I'm getting closer and closer and closer, and I'm just about to get to the rock when he turns his head to the side. And he takes one leg and he steps down from the rock, and then the other one, he steps down and he starts to move away. And I jump up on the rock and roar. And all of the baboons start to move off. I was so lucky because any one of them could have torn me apart. limb from limb, because they're so much stronger than us as humans. If I hadn't have done that, I wouldn't have survived. So I returned to my tent and I sat down, totally exhausted. But with all of this renewed energy and this connection to nature and life, I started to write down in small little prison wall writing everything about my life, what I needed to do, where I had to go, and how I had to change things. And my wife picked me up the next day. On the way back, I said to her, listen, I'll talk to you tomorrow. I'll come to the factory and we'll talk about things. But right now I need to sleep in my own bed for one night. So I slept that night. Next day at the factory, I gave her everything. And I went out on this quest to discover the connectivity of reality. So I set myself off on a totally different journey. You see, life will call upon you to change and to make those changes that are necessary. And if you don't listen, it will push you. It'll shove you harder and harder. And it'll keep on until it pushes you to that point of actual death. Because we have to return to nature and to live in love, balance, and harmony with it. And if we don't, we will not survive. Change is so fundamentally important, but our connection to nature and maintaining the balances of nature within ourselves, connecting and maintaining the balances of the environment around us are so essential for our survival. And that is why I am creating this Help Save Our World project, because we are so out of balance and harmony with nature. We are driving nature itself to extinction, and we are going with it. So nature is calling you. Are you willing to step up and become part of it before it drives you too far? Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis, for another very interesting, riveting speech. I always love to listen to you speak, and you definitely had me on the edge of my seat with that story. I just was like, okay, now what's going to happen? What's going on? This is getting crazy. So thank you.